Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122, and I want to welcome you all back to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 all-time favorite albums. Now, this is a little bit of a twist here compared to my usual Magic Metal Mondays videos when I take an individual band and I rank their albums. But I decided to do something a little bit different, because it's high time I talk about my top 10 favorite albums of all time, so let's get this started. I will leave honorable mentions down in the comment section below. And, yeah, let's get started. Coming in at number 10, the 1991 REM album, Out of Time. This album is amazing. I mean, from top to bottom, except for the radio song that opens up this album. This is probably the best alternative rock album of all time. Now, I could be wrong, because this album did follow up the classic album Green from, I think, 1989, and the album that came after it, Automatic for the People, is considered to be REM's best album. Yeah, this album, I love this album. First off, it's got Losing My Religion, and, I don't really need to say that, that's a key track. It is, because it's like REM's best song. But my favorite song on this album is Shiny Happy People. Very poppy, very happy, but yeah, I find that song to be a lot of fun, and I like it. I really love it. Yeah, Out of Time, I believe it's an underrated album. It doesn't really get much attention as, like, albums from REM that include, like, Automatic for the People and Green do. Basically, a lot of their early stuff. I think this album is a little bit underrated, but I'm giving it the love that it deserves, so greatly deserves. So, yeah, with that being said, Out of Time from 1991 by REM. Now we're moving on to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon from 1973. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest Pink Floyd fan out there, but this album is a freaking classic, and I know a lot of progressive rock fans know that. This album will definitely appear in anyone's top 10, or heck, even top 5 progressive rock albums of all time. My favorite song on here is the song Breathe. Soothing song. Love it. Love it. It feels like you're meditating and the music just washes over you. It's so freaking peaceful. Of course, I love the sound effects that are on this album, like on the song Time and on the song Money. Amazing. Freaking amazing. Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd coming in at number 9. Moving on to number 8 is the 1985 Anthrax album, Spreading the Disease. Now, this is my favorite Anthrax album for a plethora of reasons. A, because Joey Belladonna absolutely kicks butt on vocals here. The guitar duo of Dan Spitz and Scott Ian, absolutely killer. The drumming by Charlie Benante, amazing. And of course, Frank Bella, one of the most underrated metal bass players of all time. He freaking kills it on this album, I think. I really don't think there's a dull moment on this album. I mean, heck, it opens up with AIR, which is a great album opener. And couple that with Medusa, one of my favorite Anthrax songs ever. And Madhouse, probably the best song on this album. You got a solid album from top to bottom, and I love Spreading the Disease. It has the best production, and it has probably the best vocal sounding abilities by Joey Belladonna. Love this album. Moving on to number 7, Led Zeppelin 4 from 1971, I think. Now, I don't need to go on and on about by saying that Stairway to Heaven is basically what puts this album so high. Well, that's not really the case. I basically put it up here because of some of the other songs on here, like the first 3 songs on, no, the first 5 songs, no, excuse me, all of the songs puts it this high. I love Black Dog, I love Rock and Roll, and I love When the Levee Breaks, I love Misty Mountain Hop, and I love the underrated song, Battle for Evermore. Freaking amazing song, and I love it. So, with that being said, we're talking about Led Zeppelin 4 from 1971. Let me know what year that album came out in the comment section below. Be sure to rally them up. All right, moving on to number 6. We're talking about the 1986 Slayer album, Rain and Blood. Now, I've already sat there and I've talked about this on my Slayer album ranking video that I did a couple days ago. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, other than to say that Angel of Death, one of the best album openers in metal. Raining Blood, one of the best album closures in metal. Necrophobic and Altar of Sacrifice, 2 of my other favorite songs off of Rain and Blood. So with that being said, Rain and Blood, 1986 by Slayer. Moving on to number 5, we're talking about 1990's Rust in Peace by Megadeth. Now, this album is a freaking classic. I mean, the first 2 songs that open up this album are amazing. I mean, you got Holy Wars and you got Hangar 18, 2 of my favorite Megadeth songs ever. Holy Wars is, of course, my favorite Megadeth song ever. Of course, you got Tornado of Souls, another great song off of this phenomenal album. Lucretia, I believe, is a underrated gem off of this masterpiece of an album. And of course, the title track, Rust in Peace, Polaris. It's got the best Megadeth album cover ever, and it has my favorite Megadeth lineup with Mustaine, Ellefson, Friedman, and Minza on it. This is the first album to feature Minza and Friedman. With that being said, nothing really much else to say here. Rust in Peace by Megadeth from 1990. Killer album. And we're moving on to number 4. We're talking about the 1986 Metallica album, Master of Puppets. Now, this is my second favorite metal album of all time. The number 3 spot is my favorite metal album. Just a little spoiler of that. But this is my favorite Big 4 album. This is my favorite Metallica album. And it was put out by my favorite metal band ever. So, now, like with Rain and Blood, I talked about this album on the first episode of Magic Metal Mondays, so I'm not going to really get into too much detail there. So, other than I'll just go out of my way and say that Battery is one of the best thrash metal openers ever. The title track is my favorite Metallica song, and Orion, The Thing That Should Not Be, and Welcome Home Sanitarium are 2 absolute masterpieces, or 3 great songs, great gems off of this album, excuse me. So, Master of Puppets by Metallica comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, my favorite metal album of all time by my favorite power metal band and my favorite album of 1988. We're talking about Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 2 by Helloween. Now, like with Master of Puppets and Rain and Blood, I've already talked about this album in depth, but I will go out of my way and say that, I went out, greatest Helloween song ever. One of the best metal anthems ever. Same thing with Eagle Fly Free. And of course, March of Time, Rise of Fall, Dr. Stein, and the title track, Keeper of the Seven Keys. All those absolute classics. And Michael Kiske sounds amazing on this album. And fun fact, Kiske was 20 years old when he recorded this album with Helloween. So, this album is a freaking killer, and I love it so gosh darn much. Favorite metal album ever, and Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 2 by Helloween comes in at number 3. Now, number 2, we're talking about my favorite double album of all time, and my favorite progressive rock album of the early 70s. We're talking about 1973's Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes. I've already sat there and I've talked about how much I deeply love this album on my Yes album ranking on episode 2. So you could go ahead and check that out if you want to. But I basically said something on the lines of that the revealing science of God that opens up this masterpiece of an album is probably one of the best progressive rock epics you'll ever hear. John Anderson sounds amazing on this album. Steve Howe is probably at his best guitar work on this album, and Chris Squire on the bass. And of course, Rick Wakeman. I don't know why Rick Wakeman does not feel like this album is a freaking masterpiece. I mean, despite the fact of how much he contributed on this album. And he also, and during that time when Yes was recording this masterpiece, he was out with Black Sabbath, helping them record the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album, which is another one of my favorite albums, but it's not on this list. Which is another album I really enjoy. So with that being said, this album kicks butt. I mean, there is not a dull moment on this album. And of course, in my opinion, of course, Yes fans aren't really huge fans of this album. I don't get that at all. I mean, there's just so many moments of superiority and grandness and glory and beauty. I feel like this is a major improvement over Close to the Edge, and I'm not saying that Close to the Edge is a bad album. It's a freaking classic. But comparing that with Tales from Topographic Oceans, I prefer Topographic. So, yeah, I could basically listen to the whole 80 minutes of this 4-song masterpiece without stopping. I mean, yeah, I mean, what more can I say? Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes, my favorite double album of all time, and my favorite early progressive rock album. So, with that being said, yes. So with that being said, Topographic Oceans coming in at number 2. And now we get to number 1. Now, this was the band that turned me on to music. And this was one of the first albums that I ever heard from them. And this is one of the band that I'm going to be talking about is universally loved. They lost a great drummer / lyricist. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about frickin' Rush. And I'm talking about the 1978 album, Hemispheres. Where in the frickin' world am I even going to begin to talk about this album? This album is just amazing. Like with Topographic Oceans, it has 4 songs, but it's not a double album. It's a single album, so there you go. Yeah. Geddy Lee, one of the greatest bass players of all time, if not the greatest. I mean, who could ever forget that freaking album opener that is Cygnus X1 Book 2 Hemispheres that finished what the closure off of the previous album, Farewell to Kings, did. It's a freaking prog rock masterpiece, and I love it. Neil Peart is the drummer I'm talking about. My favorite drummer of all time, my favorite lyricist of all time, one of my favorite musicians of all time, period. I mean, he was a huge influence on me, and I'm pretty sure, as a full-time musician, one of the instruments I play is drums. Yeah, all credits can go to him. And it was Rush that basically kicked off my musical career. And I gotta give this album credit where credit is due. I mean, all 4 songs are classics. What more can I say? All 4 songs off of this album are freaking classics. I mean, Circumstances, one of my favorite Rush songs of all time. The Trees. I mean, where can you find a band that performs a song that feels like you're in a freaking forest with peaceful birds singing to you all around and the wind slowly breezing through the trees, if you will. And I feel like The Trees does that. And of course, who could forget Levi Estrangiato? It is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, instrumental in all of progressive rock. I mean, and that song was based off of a dream that guitarist Alex Lifeson had. My goodness. Apparently that dream must have been pretty darn wild, because it's basically lots of guitar solos, lots of bass solos, lots of drum solos. Heck, there's even probably like a little bit of a keyboard solo, if you will, like midway through the song. And it's basically just three guys freaking jamming. I love this album. Hemisphere's my favorite album of all time. So that pretty much wraps up my top 10 all-time favorite albums. Now, if you don't agree with mine, that's perfectly okay. You can leave yours down in the comments section below. I'd be certainly happy to hear about what your top 10 albums are. And it could be from any rock genre, whether it's pop rock or rap rock or hip hop rock. I'm just kidding about those aforementioned too. But if it's pop rock, alternative rock, grunge rock, metal, progressive rock, whatever kind of rock you want to put. Heck, even classic rock or even jazz. Type those down in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to hear that. And if you have any recommendations on which albums I should listen to, specifically metal albums, also write those down in the comment section below. So thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Waterdive 122 signing off, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.